بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This time last year I began to do a short series of book reviews, 1-minute book reviews that I posted on the Tawfiq Online Instagram page. This year I thought I would do a longer video. This time I will be reviewing the books that are available in English that cover Ḥanbali Fiqh. As I'm sure many of you are aware of, there is a growing interest in studying Ḥanbali Fiqh in the West. Unfortunately, though, there isn't that much available in terms of material available in the English language relating to Ḥanbali Fiqh in particular. However, what I have in front of me here, I can confidently say it covers most of what has been published in English. And so what I'll be doing, inshallah, is briefly going over each of these books in this video, inshallah ta'ala. And so hopefully it will be a useful guide to someone who wants to study fiqh, in particular Ḥanbali Fiqh here in the West or in English. So I'll just put these books to the side and we'll take one at a time. And the idea is I'll be going over the mukhtasarat first, the shorter text first, and then we'll sort of build our way up to the more detailed texts. So the first translation we'll be looking at is Bidayatul Abid by Al-Ba'li, who's a Shami scholar who passed away in the year 1192 Hijri. And as we will see, a lot of the scholars, they generally hail from that region, from Ash-Sham, especially amongst the Mutaakhirin, the later Ḥanbali scholars. So this particular text, it's a very basic text, and it only really covers the sections of ibadah. So I'll just show you here. So you have the book of Tahara, prayer, funerals, zakat, fasting, hajj, and jihad, and that's it. And that's the book itself. So the book itself, even in Arabic, it doesn't go beyond that. So it's a very basic text in Arabic. It hasn't received that much khidmah in the sense that there haven't been that many commentaries written for it. And but nonetheless, it's a very basic text to study. It's definitely a basic primer that someone could study, and they can be introduced to the madhab through a text like this. So it's something I would encourage people to read and to study, preferably with a teacher. Generally, when it comes to fiqh in particular, it's very important to study with a teacher. The translation itself comes with the Arabic text. Now, usually when people translate Arabic to English when they include the Arabic, sometimes they dedicate a particular page to the Arabic and another page to the English. So it's a parallel translation, page by page. Actually, this translator, in his translation of Umdatul Talib, changed the method, and he kept the Arabic just on the right-hand side and the English on the left-hand side, which personally I prefer. So that would be a good way to start off studying fiqh. However, please just remember that it doesn't cover the section on social dealings, so marriage, divorce, inheritance, etc. So if you want to study a text from beginning to end, then this probably wouldn't be the text for you to study. But if it's sometimes people will offer this as a short course to be studied in the space of a few months, then this would serve as a good introduction. Studying a complete text from beginning to end would take considerably longer. So that's Bidayatul Abid. Moving on to the next text. written by Ibn Abdul Hadi, who died in the year 909 after Hijrah, so earlier than Imam al-Ba'li. So this particular book, I actually gave a 1-minute review of it last year. So, but maybe we'll look at it in a bit more detail here. This book, written by Ibn Abdul Hadi, rahimahullah, was actually part of a larger text, Jami' al-Ulum. And Jami' al-Ulum was a text that the author basically was attempting to write an encyclopedia, not just on fiqh, but many other sciences and disciplines such as medicine and etc., which he then summarized and then summarized again, basically. So this translation, al-Furu' fil fiqh, Kitab al-Furu' fil fiqh, it's basically taken from that. The text itself, it's extremely summarized, and it covers the bulk of, it covers all of ibadat, and it covers the most important sections of mu'amalat that a layperson would need to know. So obviously we'll have buyu', marriage, divorce, inheritance, and certain matters relating to crime and injurious crimes and legal punishments. He has left out a lot of sections of the book, not the translator, but the actual Arabic text itself. But nonetheless, I think for a layperson, this serves as a very, very, very good introduction to fiqh. As I said, it's extremely summarized, and as you can see, the text itself, really, it's something that you can, the translator has added the bullet points, but that's the nature of the text. It's something that can be written as bullet points, essentially. So very concise and short phrases and sentences. So that's something I would probably encourage for a total beginner to study before, maybe even I would encourage them to study this more than probably Bidayat al-Abid, simply due to the fact that it's got more, so it covers more of the chapters in a book of fiqh than Bidayat al-Abid. Bidayat al-Abid, probably some of the masail will be more detailed than this particular book. But as I said, if you want an overall understanding and an overview of fiqh, then this translation definitely serves that purpose. And it also has the Arabic at the back. Okay, so unlike the translation of Bidayat al-Abid, where it's got the Arabic and the English next to one another, you've got all of the Arabic. The actual text actually starts from here, and so it's actually that thick. And then it's got the Arabic text, and then there's an appendix here taken from Ibn Qudama's section on fasting and i'tikaf from Al-Muqni', which we will briefly speak about later probably. And there's also Ibn Aqil's Ḥanbali's essay on Islamic manners as an extra appendix there. So that's something that's, again, short and concise, and something that maybe could be used in as a course to teach people, like in a weekend dawrah, as a suggestion. So the translator did a very good job of this as well, and it's easily available to purchase as well. As for the previous book, Bidayat al-Abid, then that's generally available on Amazon. This book, however, you can generally find it in most Islamic bookshops as well. So that's an added advantage there. Moving on to another translation. So the Ḥanbali acts of worship, and so this is basically the section of ibadat taken from Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. So Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, written by Ibn Balban, who died in the year 1083. So to a similar sort of era of al-Ba'li and Ibn Abdul Hadi. And so again, all from the Mutaakhirin. Okay, so again, another Shami scholar. So Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, you can tell by the name, like the most, supreme synopsis. So it's extremely concise and one of the shortest, you can say, and probably one of the most concise mutun amongst the Hanabila. So again, it serves as a very good starting point for students. However, only the section of ibadat has been translated here by Musa Faber, and I have heard that there are people that might be working on a translation for the section on ibadat, but it hasn't been published according to what I know. So this is definitely a very good introduction to Ḥanbali Fiqh. And it has both the English and the Arabic. Okay, so it's not parallel. The translator has done a good job, alhamdulillah. There are a few typos in the book, and I've actually been communicating with the translator. So, inshallah, hopefully those typos will be seen too. And this is, it's a book that it's still being taught. It's a very popular text in the Arab world as well. There is a famous commentary to it, Kashf al-Mukhaddarat, which was actually authored by the author of authored by al-Ba'li. So this book. So he actually wrote the commentary to Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. Again, there's another commentary in in Arabic as well that came out recently, called Hawashi al-Sabighat by al-Qu'aymi, who's a contemporary scholar in Ḥanbali Fiqh. So that's again, this is available on Amazon as well. Right. So in terms of it covers all of the section of ibadat, and it's probably a bit more maybe dense than Bidayat al-Abid, and definitely more detailed than Kitab Furu' al-Fiqh. And so it will contain more masail. I did notice in certain chapters that there were some really basic masail that you would think would be mentioned in a basic book, of this nature, but for some reason the author didn't mention them. What comes to mind is when it comes to ghusl. So if we go to the section relating to ghusl, let's have a look. So here, it mentions the occasions obligating the purificatory bath for ghusl, but it doesn't actually mention the method of how to do ghusl. Okay, so that's something which I found a bit odd. So basically, and there are a few other occasions like that I found in Akhsar. So we can move on, I think, to the next to the next book, inshallah. We'll move on to discuss الأجوبة الجلية في في الأحكام الحنبلية. Now, as you can see, there are two different translations available for this book. I first purchased this copy. This particular version came out more recently, and it's a small booklet written by I'm here, but you can see Qudumi or Qaddumi. Okay, so he passed away in the year 1336. So this is relatively contemporary. So just over 100 years ago, the author died. So again, another another Shami scholar. And it seems as though this particular book was based on Imam al-Shaykh Mar'i al-Karmi's Dalil al-Talib. So it seems to be based on that. And it's basically a sort of question and answer. It's just a basic question and answer of the fiqh of ibadat. And it mentions about 100 masail. Okay, about 100 masail. So in this particular translation, which I personally prefer the layout of it, and the translation of it seems quite accurate from what I've seen. And as you can see, it's based on questions. So what is the ruling of adhan and iqama? The ruling of adhan and iqama is that they are fard kifaya, communally obligatory on free men who are not traveling. The other version, on the other hand, has the Arabic and the English together on the same page, which I find a bit more. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of translations like that, especially with. I find the numbering system a bit distracting, but it's a good translation. Okay, it's a good translation. I think either of the two would do. This is probably work out a bit cheaper than this version, as this is slightly thicker, but both translations are, they do the job. It's and for contemporary Muslims, I think as the author is relatively contemporary to us, so it died just over 100 years ago. The language and the style that has been written in, it's very easy to understand and to comprehend, and the author definitely avoids complex masail or rare issues that the contemporary Muslim won't really come across. The more traditional books of fiqh, you find mentioned some in many cases very sort of rare issues and circumstances that many contemporary Muslims won't find themselves in. So for that reason, I think this particular book serves as a very good introduction to Ḥanbali Fiqh. But again, it only covers the section of ibadah, and doesn't touch upon mu'amalat. And this is something that I would recommend be studied as over a short period of time. It's not something that really should be studied in depth and in detail. Maybe it's something that could be studied over one summer, for example, as a summer intensive. But if you want to study anything in more detail, then I'll probably suggest another text. So for a short, sort of concise dawra, I think this is a great way to start studying Ḥanbali Fiqh. Okay, moving on now to the next book. Again, The Path of the Wayfarer. So this is a translation of Manhaj al-Salikin. Something I translated, published sometime last year. Again, I'd done a book review for this last year as well in the 1 minute book reviews, but again, I would probably just go over it in a bit more detail. So this was actually personally my first translation project that I undertook. I began translating it around 2005, and the second part of the book that I translated was done very, very quickly. And it's not published yet, but inshallah it'll be published very, very soon, hopefully by the end of the month, inshallah. Now, when I first translated, as I said, it was my first attempt at translating, so it had many issues. a lot of mistakes. But alhamdulillah, over the years, I've sort of worked on it, and alhamdulillah, we managed to publish the first volume of it. So the section of Ibadat, which was published last year. Now, this particular book was written by a contemporary scholar, so probably the most contemporary scholar that I've mentioned that today. So Sheikh Abdul Rahman Nasir Sa'di, rahimahullah, he passed away 1376 Hijri, so 1957. So he, rahimahullah, was, I'm sure many of you will know, he was one of the main teachers of Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin, rahimahullah. Because the text is very contemporary, it's very easy to read, and probably the least complex book in terms of masail. So he all of the sort of complex masail that you find in books of fiqh, even in some of the basic introductions to Ḥanbali Fiqh, you'll find that he's completely omitted. It is a complete text in fiqh, except that it doesn't include Kitab al-Jihad, but all the other abwab, major sections in books of fiqh, you find that he mentions them. Sometimes he merges chapters into one book, but otherwise it follows the standard format of any traditional text in fiqh. When the author, rahimahullah, he wrote this book, he did mention, he wrote a letter to Sheikh Ibn Aqil, rahimahullah, explaining sort of background to this book, and he mentioned that he basically gathered together the well-known sort of mukhtasarat, like Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat and Umdatul Fiqh, etc., and he tried to summarize them and produce a very basic sort of primer and introduction to Ḥanbali Fiqh, and so he produced Manhaj al-Salikin. However, out of all the books that I've mentioned so far, this is probably the book that sort of departs from the madhab the most. And usually when he departs from the madhab, he usually opts for the ikhtiyarat and the choices of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. So that's the general format of the book. Now, this is a book that we have been teaching in Tawfiq Online, and alhamdulillah, we've taught the section of Ibadat twice, and we are just about completing. In fact, we have our final lesson this coming Sunday for the second part of the book, and alhamdulillah, as you can see, it's a very spaced out translation. The idea was to format it like this so that people can use it as a study text, so they can write their notes in it. So I've provided ample and generous space in the margins for people to write their notes. So it's a parallel translation. The numbering system wasn't done by Imam al-Sa'di, Shaykh al-Sa'di rahimahullah. That was done by one of the editors who published the book in Arabic, the Dar al-Ibn Jawzi print. So again, this book, it's a very good introduction again for people who want to study a complete text in fiqh from beginning to end, and it's definitely suitable for beginners, okay, for absolute beginners. Now, what makes this text different to, say, the other texts that we've looked at so far? Firstly, as I mentioned, one of the major differences is that it does depart from the madhab quite often, usually in favor for Ibn Taymiyyah's opinions, rahimahullah. Secondly, though, out of all of the texts that I have mentioned, this will be the only one that I've mentioned so far anyway, that it will be a complete translation of a book of fiqh, meaning covering all of the abwab in fiqh. Kitab Furu' al-Fiqh, an epitome of Ḥanbali substantive law that we looked at before, that does cover the major sections in fiqh, so including muamalat, the major, but it does miss out quite a few chapters. So there are chapters in the second part of Manhaj al-Salikin, social dealings chapter section that has abwab, that has chapters that you won't find in Kitab Furu' al-Fiqh. And also, this is a book that, I would recommend for people who aren't so keen on studying fiqh in detail. So if someone wants to study the basics of fiqh, and isn't bothered about really studying a text beyond this, they just want to learn the basics or fard al-ain knowledge, and they're not so bothered about studying Ḥanbali Fiqh in particular. They just want to learn basic fiqh, and that's it. Study one text and act upon that. Then this is probably a good introduction. This would be a good text that I would advise. If someone, and the reason being is because it's very easy, and it sort of avoids those more complex sort of masail that you tend to find in the more traditional books of fiqh. So it's it's something that I would advise for people who don't really want to study fiqh in great detail and aren't so bothered about departing from the opinion of the madhab. Having said that, there is a version of this book, but it's in Arabic, which is like a Ḥanbalized version of Manhaj al-Salikin. And actually, I have the book here. I will just bring it down. So this is it's called تحقيق الرغبات بحنبلة منهج السالكين وزيادات by Sheikh Abdul Muhammad al-Wahid al-Azhari. And so what he's done basically is Ḥanbalized the text. So wherever you see in the text anything that's red, then that's an indication that he's basically edited the book, and he's mentioned the actual Ḥanbali opinion. So the black text is actually Manhaj al-Salikin, and the red text, the author, basically Sheikh Muhammad al-Wahid, has edited it to make it conform to the Mu'tamad, or the official opinion of the Ḥanbali school of thought. Now, it's definitely, I know some people do question the way the author has done this, but he's made it clear. He's made it clear that this is, he's not, playing about with the text. He's making it clear that this is a Ḥanbalized version of the text itself. Some chapters he's changed it so much that, if you look here, it's practically changed the whole chapter. And he has included like certain chapters like this book here, which wasn't even mentioned in Manhaj al-Salikin at all. So, but nonetheless, it's a good, if you are studying Manhaj al-Salikin and you do understand Arabic, this is useful to have, a useful reference, just to see where the author differed from the actual madhab. But in Tawfiq Online, when we did teach Manhaj al-Salikin, we generally did mention when Sheikh al-Sa'di, rahimahullah, he sort of departed from the madhab and adopted another opinion. Okay, we can move on to the next book I wanted to mention, which is Ibn Qudama's Fiqh of Worship from Umdatul Fiqh. Now, there's a few points that we need to mention. So as you can see, we're sort of gradually getting, the books are getting more detailed. As you can see, this is probably one of the bigger books in English anyway. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to mention. Firstly, Ibn Qudama rahimahullah, the author of many important books in fiqh, and probably most famous for his encyclopedia in comparative fiqh, Al-Mughni, which is actually a commentary of Mukhtasar al-Khiraqi, which so al-Khiraqi, who passed away in the year 334 after Hijrah. So the Mukhtasar al-Khiraqi is known for being one of the first, if not the first, major matans in texts in Ḥanbali Fiqh. So Ibn Qudama, he wrote Al-Mughni as a commentary to that. So it's commonly known as being a text in comparative fiqh, but it's actually a commentary to Mukhtasar al-Khiraqi. But then obviously he sort of expands, and then he mentions the other madhahib, the opinions of the other madhahib in that particular issue. What's important to note, though, is that Ibn Qudama, as I mentioned, so he passed away in the year 620 after Hijrah, and so he's the earliest scholar that we've mentioned so far. All of the other scholars that I've mentioned so far have been from what is known as from the mutaakhirin, the later Hanbali scholars. So those scholars essentially came in an era where the madhab was more consolidated and systemized, whereas Ibn Qudama is like right at the end of the era of the mutawassitin. So you had like the earlier Hanbali scholars who basically were concerned with passing on the opinions of Imam Ahmad. It wasn't sort of canonized and systemized in a great way at that time. And in the era of the mutawassitin, which really started from Qadi Abu Ya'la rahimahullah, and that era was more for sort of bringing together the various different aqwal and riwayat of Imam Ahmad, and it was starting to form into a more systemized madhab in the period of the mutawassitin. So Ibn Qudama came, towards the end of that era, and that's why you find the books written at that particular time, they're very different to the books that from the mutaakhirin. The books of the mutaakhirin, you tend to find them to be a lot more systematic, and they tend to follow suit, and are quite similar to each other in terms of the way that they have been written and the chapter headings, and also of course in terms of opinions as well. So for that reason, the mutaakhirin, I mean, of course they paid great attention to the works of Ibn Qudama and the mutawassitin, but the books from the mutawassitin weren't really, I mean, they're not really studied today as much as, say, the books of the mutaakhirin. So because the books of the mutaakhirin, they sort of finalized, you can say, the mu'tamad and the official opinions of the madhab, and for that reason you'll find that most scholars tend to teach from the books of the mutaakhirin. It doesn't really make much sense to teach something like Mukhtasar al-Khiraqi when the madhab had developed so much from that period onwards. So you really want to take the khulasa, or like the sort of the end result of the efforts of the scholars of the madhab. That's why you find people tend to teach from the books of the mutaakhirin, and so the basic texts that we've mentioned so far, but going beyond that, books like Dalil al-Talib or Umdat al-Talib, Zad al-Mustaqni', Rawd al-Murbi', etc. Those books tend to be taught more. So that's just a couple of points I wanted to mention very quickly about Ibn Qudama and the fact that he was from that particular era. We spoke briefly about his book Al-Mughni, but actually he wrote other books as well. So he had a sort of syllabus for studying fiqh, you can say, starting from this particular book, Umdatul Fiqh, and which basically mentions one opinion within the madhab. And what you do find is that he sometimes mentions hadith. Okay, so sometimes he will mention hadith, but that he even mentions in his introduction. He does that tabarrukan, just seeking barakah from those hadith, and he doesn't do it as a sort of way of teaching people fiqh. As you probably notice, all basic books of fiqh don't begin with teaching adillah and teaching proofs. That comes at a later stage. The duty of the beginner is just to learn the masail, understand them, internalize them, and then once he's mastered that, he can go on to a level higher. But Ibn Qudama didn't mention hadith for that reason, just to get people into, deriving masail from evidences. That wasn't his purpose, and the proof of that lies in the fact that he wrote another book a level up from Umdatul Fiqh, which was Al-Muqni', and Al-Muqni' doesn't mention adillah. Al-Muqni', so the Muqni' that comes after Umdatul Fiqh, it mentions another riwayah within the madhab. So it mentions 2 riwayahs within the madhab, and it's more dense as well as a book. So it mentions far more masail. And Al-Muqni' gained a lot of popularity amongst the scholars in the madhab, much more than Umdatul Fiqh itself. So there are some great commentaries of it, and we have Al-Mubdi' by Ibn al-Muflih and others well-known commentaries to Al-Muqni'. And of course, as we will see, a summary of Al-Muqni' by Imam al-Hajjawi known as Zad al-Mustaqni'. And that we'll talk about that a bit later, inshallah. And then he authored Al-Kafi, which basically is where he mentions the masail with the adillah. Okay, and then he wrote Al-Mughni. Right. So this particular book, as I said, because it's not really from the mutaakhirin. It hasn't been given that much attention compared to, say, books like Zad al-Mustaqni'. And the format of the book is somewhat different to the fiqh books of the mutaakhirin. So that's why, if someone wants to sort of familiarize themselves with the madhab, it's a good place. You can start with it, but if you really want to understand the books of the mutaakhirin and familiarize yourselves with them, then this probably isn't the place to go to. Now, as you can see with this particular translation, by the way, so this I purchased a number of years ago, so I've just come to realize that, come to know that this has been the second volume of this has been translated. So the section of Mu'amalat has been translated. So that means the entire Umdatul Fiqh is now available in English. Alhamdulillah. So the title of it is different though. So it's not just called the Fiqh. It's published by the same people, by IIPH, but it's now called Umdatul Fiqh Explained, a commentary on Ibn Qudama's The Reliable Manual of Fiqh. Now, with this, so notice this is actually a comment. This is actually a commentary. Yeah? So this is not just a translation, but with a commentary. So everything above the line here is the actual matan, and below you find commentary. And as you can see, it's written like a textbook. One thing that you'll find with the commentary, though, the commentary, like Sheikh Sa'di, he often departs from the opinion of the madhab. So that's something you need to be aware of. And often he will try to prove the opinion that he chooses not to accept from the madhab, and mention the adillah for those particular masail. Like, for example, the issue regarding the types of water. So he mentions that there are only really 2 categories of water, as opposed to three categories of water that's commonly accepted and known within the madhab. So that's something just to be aware of. Otherwise, there is space at the bottom of the translation that will be useful for writing notes. So this is a good text, a good textbook to have. But if you want to, really familiarize yourself with the sort of mu'tamad, the official opinion of the madhab, and according to the mutaakhirin of the madhab, then this is not the place to go. For that, you would need to look at other books like Untitled Talib or Dalil al-Talib or Zad al-Mustaqna'. Although, as we will mention, Zad al-Mustaqna', there are quite a few instances where the author does he doesn't choose the mu'tamad opinion of the madhab, the relied upon opinion of the madhab. Okay, now there is another translation of Umdah. I think it's called the Mainstay. That particular, I think, was translated by Muhtar Holland. That particular translation, I wouldn't recommend. I don't have a copy of it, but I wouldn't recommend. Because I found it to have a number of errors which were, in my opinion, quite shocking. So, translating like luhum al-ibil wal jazar, or the meat of camel as swine, was quite shocking. And there were a few other major blunders that I came across in that translation. I can't remember who published it, but it was called The Mainstay. So I wouldn't encourage that particular translation, and for anyone to purchase that particular translation. Moving on now, we'll move on to another translation, and this was again by the same brother who translated Bidayat al-Abid. So this is Umdatul Talib by Mansour al-Buhuti. And Mansour al-Buhuti rahimahullah, so he was actually an Egyptian scholar. So all of the other scholars that we mentioned so far, from the Mutaakhirin, and from the later Hanabila, were from the sort of Sham region. And the Mutawassitin generally, they sort of come from the Iraq region. But Imam al-Buhuti rahimahullah was an Egyptian. He passed away in the year 1051. And really he's known as one of the greatest scholars of the madhab, and some of his books have become are widely studied. In particular, his commentary to Rawd al-Murbi', or his hashia his book Rawd al-Murbi', which is a sort of hashia of Zad al-Mustaqna'. And of course he wrote Kashaf al-Qina', which is a commentary of al-Iqna' by Imam al-Hajjawi. So those two books are for the mutaakhirin, from the most, they're definitely the two out of the books anyway, the two most sort of important books of the mutaakhirin of the madhab. Now, in this particular book, he followed. We haven't spoken about Zad al-Mustaqni yet, but as you can see, this book is more dense. It definitely contains more masail than all of the other previous books that we've looked at so far. So this is more, although compared to the other books, this will be more of a sort of intermediate level. It's quite similar in terms of density to Umdatul Fiqh, I would say, but it's got more masail than Umdatul Fiqh, and this is a parallel translation, which in my opinion it works better than having them side by side on the same page. This book has received a lot of khidmah, in the sense that there are some very important, well-known commentaries to it, and none, of course, in English. But it hasn't received probably as much khidmah and service as to Zad al-Mustaqni'. So Zad al-Mustaqni' has generally been received. It has, it's been commentated upon, it's been explained, especially in this era. And in particular, the scholars in sort of Saudi and Gulf region, they tend to prefer maybe teaching something like Zad al-Mustaqni', whereas the scholars maybe in Asham, the Hanabila, will probably give more preference to a book like this. So it follows the sort of similar format to Zad al-Mustaqni', but it is more concise. And a good thing about this book, actually, in comparison to Zad, is that it doesn't differ from the madhab as much as Zad al-Mustaqni'. So Zad al-Mustaqni', as we will see, does differ from the madhab on quite a few occasions. Some people number it about, some people said it was about 30 instances. Some people take it as much as 100, just over 100 masail. But that's out of a few thousand, okay, where he differs from the madhab in Zad, that is. So Umdatul Talib aligns itself with the madhab more than Zad al-Mustaqni', but it's a bit more concise. It's more concise than Zad. So Zad will mention more masail than Umdah. So this is not to be confused with Umdatul Fiqh. This is Umdatul Talib. Okay, and that leads us on to the final book that we will be looking at, which is the translation for Zad al-Mustaqni'. Now, Zad al-Mustaqni' was written by Imam al-Hajjawi, who died in the year 968. So again, from the Mutaakhirin. And so Imam al-Hajjawi, Sharaf al-Din Abu al-Najah, al-Hajjawi rahimahullah. So this book, Zad al-Mustaqni', is actually a summary of, is ikhtisar of Ibn Qudama's al-Muqni'. So remember, Ibn Qudama, he wrote Umdatul Fiqh, then he wrote al-Muqni'. So Zad al-Mustaqni' is the summary of al-Muqni'. As I mentioned, the Imam al-Hajjawi does differ from the sort of official opinion of the madhab on quite a few instances, but despite that doesn't really sort of take anything away from the book, because the book itself has gained a lot of popularity and qabul, acceptance, despite it being a sort of it's not from the mutawwalat, it's not like a long book, but it mentions a lot of masail. Okay, a lot of masail, and out of all the books that we've mentioned so far, it contains the most amount of masail. Often people say that because it contains more masail, then why don't people just study something like Umdatul Fiqh first? But the issue is with Umdatul Fiqh, it's written by a scholar from the Mutawassitin, which will make it a bit more difficult if you really want to sort of master the madhab, in my opinion. That's why it's better to start from the Mutaakhirin. And also you find a lot of students in the West, they're not really total beginners, in the sense that they would have studied fiqh from before, they would have come across fiqh, whether it be in like weekly classes or things that they've heard and read online. So people do have a level of familiarity with fiqh, which I think you can say it sort of qualifies them to study a text like Zad. Often people treat Zad as a sort of higher end text, but it's not a higher end text. It definitely isn't as easy as something like Manhaj as-Salikin, but people shouldn't be afraid of it. They shouldn't be afraid of it, and so and it's a text, as I said, that it's quite popular, especially in particular in the Arabian Peninsula. It's taught quite a lot, and with its super commentary, the Hashia, so with the commentary of Rawd al-Murbi' by Imam al-Buhuti. So that's actually taught usually, I don't know if it's still taught, but like it's in the secondary school system, like college level, it's taught. And So it's a great comment. So this particular translation covers only the section of ibadat, only the section of ibadat. So this is translated by Musa Faba. So he also translated Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. So we spoke about that before. So these are the two Ḥanbali books that he has translated. So he's translated many other books as well. So do have a look at his other translations. But he mainly publishes books in Shafi'i fiqh now. So I haven't really looked at those, but that's where he's put more attention to that now. So this is a good translation. It's got the Arabic and the English, and also he does include notes from Rawd al-Murbi', which is a very important, if not the most important, commentary to Zad al-Mustaqni'. So in fact we will be teaching this Tawfiq Online after this Ramadan, inshallah. And I've told students to get themselves a copy of this particular translation. Now, there is another translation with a commentary by Sheikh Al-Fawzan. However, I don't have that at the moment, and so I can't really comment on that. But definitely the Sheikh Al-Fawzan, he will sort of depart from the madhab again, like Sheikh Al-Sadi. So that's something to be aware of. And whereas this just contains the matan, which is and for that reason, that's why I recommended it to the students. If you just want to have just the matan, then this is all that you need. Unfortunately, the second part of the book, again dealing with muamalat, it hasn't been translated, and I don't know if it will be by the translator. I have a feeling it won't be, because again the translator is mainly focusing on publishing books in Shafi'i fiqh. So may Allah give him tawfiq in that, inshallah. Maybe the other translation that comes with Sheikh Al-Fawzan's commentary, that might they probably will complete the translation of that. But again, I can't comment on the quality of the translation. And finally, this is a similar book, which is a summary of Islamic jurisprudence, which is basically a translation of a book called Al-Mulakhas Al-Fiqhi, which is not to be confused with Sheikh Fawzan's commentary on Zad al-Mustaqni'. So the Al-Mulakhas Al-Fiqhi was actually, it's a transcription of some lectures that the Sheikh gave. I think it was on a radio channel, radio station, where he was going over Rawd al-Murbi', which is a commentary of Zad al-Mustaqni'. So these are it's like loose sort of transcripts from those lessons. So it's in 2 volumes. I remember I did teach this book, the section of Tahara and Salah, about 10 years ago, and I found it had quite a lot of mistakes. So that's something just to be wary of. And again, he sort of doesn't make clear what the opinion of the madhab is and what isn't. So that's something else, you need to be aware of. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend, if someone wants to really sort of study like Ḥanbali Fiqh and know what Ḥanbali Fiqh is, then I wouldn't recommend this for that reason. And that really concludes what I wanted to cover. So that was really just something that came to my mind that I wanted to do today. So I pray it's been of benefit to you all, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He accepts it. If I have made any mistakes, or if anyone has any comments, please do get in contact with me, inshallah. Otherwise, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all, grant you success in your studies, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's Ramadan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your fasts and accept your prayers and recitation of the Quran. Ameen. وجزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.